Welcome back to the floor of IAE 2952. I'm here with the floor tour. You can see here that all of these folks are here to take a tour on Anvil Aerospace Day here on the floor. It's a big day. It's a big day. Anvil has a lot of ships and a lot of lore and a lot of other things going on with it. So remember, if you've been enjoying these all this week, we do this every day. Come on, join us at 3 p.m. Eastern every day that they have these tours going on to up until Saturday, and we will be touring the floor. So hopefully, if you're new to Star Citizen or if you're interested in Star Citizen, this can help you out a little bit. I've heard some people say it's kind of overwhelming to go to the floor, but hopefully these will help you pare down some of the ideas of what these ships are and what they do and how it functions, as well as a little bit of background on some of the stories of these ships. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about Anvil Aerospace. So Anvil Aerospace is complicated because Anvil Aerospace isn't actually the first version of Anvil Aerospace. The first version of Anvil Aerospace was actually called Case Aerospace, started by a man by the name of Leonard Case. Now, Leonard Case is interesting because he was the dude who created the prototype that would eventually, or the blueprint that would eventually become the modern Aurora. It was called the Starbright 3000 or something like that. But he worked for RSI as a ship designer. He managed to make this super easy to control, simple ship in 2603, or like 2600. And he managed to design, get it released, and then quit. Because he hated the bureaucracy at RSI. He thought that the bureaucracy at RSI was the biggest problem with the company itself. He famously said something to the effect of, when it's harder for designers to actually design, then you've got a problem. So that is how is, the evolvement, the creation of Case Aerospace, where he founded his own company specifically to do that. So he created something that's similar to what we could consider today as Aurora, maybe like a competitor called the Cosmos Sloop in 2604, which did okay. The problem was that it, it's 2604, which did fine, but it was just a year before the outbreak of the Second Tavaran War. So, yeah, it didn't do well because people were not concerned with buying ships. So, but this was a blessing in disguise, because Case was then able to get a contract from the UAE military to build a ship to counter the new phalanx shields. And what Case built was the Hurricane. That did really well. The Mezzers were very impressed, and after the war ended, the Mezzers gave Case Aerospace the contract to build a patrol ship specifically to replace the aging Perseus. But, tragically, Leonard Case died in an air collision in 2615, and while the company tried to move on without him, the Navy wasn't interested in continuing to make the Hurricane, and the contract was dropped from their they lost the contract. So Case Aerospace closed in 2623 and was added to the roster of some investment firm. Flash forward to the mid-28th century. A man by the name of J. Harris Arnold is a kid growing up, wants to be a spacecraft engineer, finds the works of Leonard Case, falls in love with them, and decides that he's going to make ships in the same style and as an homage to the old Case Aerospace ships. He does so and forms his own company that we know as Anvil Aerospace in 27... Looking at my dates. In 2772. Now, this was specifically to make military ships because Arnold was very, very dedicated to the Hurricane. Big favorite ship. So that didn't do so well with the Mezzers. But in 2792, the measures were overthrown. And during this readjustment of the new UAE, Anvil stepped forward to become the favorite son of all these new military manufacturers when they produced the Terrapin. That eventually got them the license to produce the Hornet, which became their big break. And since then, Anvil has become the darling of the UAE, getting lots and lots of contracts for military ships. In fact, they've been
going on
replaced a lot of it. So, all right, with that, it's a tour, my bad, dude. It's a tour.
Oh, more comfy.
All right. With that being said, let's move on to the Terrapin. Let's take a look at the first thing, Terrapin. This is what happens when you do live recordings like this.
And not do a point, because I think people just walking by would have been interested to hear what you're saying.
Yeah, but can't really do FOIP like this. So, sadly, because it's not useful.
Intimidation usually works.
All right, so this is the Anvil Terrapin. So the Terrapin was first produced in 2795, I believe, towards the end of the 28th century. It was the first Anvil ship to be produced, and it is a picket ship. The idea is that this ship goes out in front, scans for a bunch of areas, and is kind of a stand-in for the military sending out a capital ship, because it's got these overcharged sensors, and it's very beefy and protected. This ship was so well designed that you see these flaps right here? Those are not flaps. Those are vents. This ship has so much armor on it that it overheats. So it needed a vent to be able to release some of the heat while it was operating, because it would get super, super hot. And it's called coming up for air is when what they do. But there's a crew of 1 to 2. It's got an expansive scanning suite, and was fairly loved. It's supposedly very easy to maintain, very rugged, and forgiving sort of ship. So after many Anvil veterans who flew the Anvil Terrapin, after they left the service, many of them purchased a Terrapin after the fact. So with this, let's move on to the scam ship, the literal scam ship, the Gladiator. So this is the T8. Yep. So the T8, also known as the T3 Gladiator, has an interesting story behind it. So towards the end of the 29th century, a group of up-and-coming starter scientists, engineers, created a torpedo called the MVT, which is like the multi-vector torpedo. This torpedo supposedly could be undetected on scanners, could evade attacks and guide itself as long as it had a targeting solution, and could skip past shields. It was this ultimate wonder weapon of like great proportions. But there was something wrong with it. Still, during the development of this, the Navy immediately bought onto this to test it and try it, but they didn't have a ship that could actually function with it. So they tapped Anvil to build them a ship for that purpose. That became the Gladiator. The Gladiator was, you see this spar right here in the front? That is actually a targeting array. That's the same targeting array that was designed to fire the multi-vector torpedo, the MVT. That's what this was designed for. So this would effectively point at a target and allow it to kind of laze the target as it would go in. Because no other ship was really designed for this sort of thing, and no ship was like, the Retaliator was too big, wasn't really well suited for it. This was a problem. So they built this Gladiator. The issue is that once they got to the testing phase, they found out that the torpedo was a giant scam. It was just a normal torpedo with a bunch of off-the-shelf parts slapped onto it. It didn't work. There was nothing like it. So they built this big, expensive ship, and actually had started their own production runs on it before they actually knew that the missile would work. So the Navy, instead of admitting defeat, decided to double down and declare that they were going to completely revolutionize how torpedo bombing works by changing this into a carrier-based torpedo bomber. And then didn't give it any support because it's got a turret, right? That turret can work. No, it doesn't. It does not work for what you think it does. And to make matters even worse, because the Navy already knew this was a joke of a ship, they only put the worst of the worst pilots on Gladiator duty. So the Gladiators became the absolute, like, bane of the Navy. They were just absolutely crapped upon by everyone. Until the Navy realized that they could improve training and they could actually utilize these ships the way they're supposed to be used as carrier bombers. And slowly, but they kind of rehabilitated their image. And groups like the Black Crows of Squadron 214, this is their primary ship. Now, this also has gotten a lot of work from the civilian market because of this. This modular bay here, or this bay here, this holds torpedoes, is actually modular. You can swap out this bay for a number of different accessories. Some of them are post-market civilian add-ons. For instance, there are Gladiators that are used to literally bomb clouds to do weather control, cloud seeding. There are Gladiators that are used as search and rescue craft, as command and control craft. Various different options that they're done with this modular bay. And this ship has a lot of guns, even for its size. 4 size 3s, 2 controlled by the pilot, 2 controlled by the gunner, plus just a ton of missiles. So it's a fairly effective ship for what it's used for, but it doesn't have a lot of uses outside of what you can do with a modular bay. All right, from that, let's move on over to one of the newest ships, the Arrow. So the Arrow is actually one of the most recent ships. It is built during this light fighter craze of the late 2940s. So this craze was because the Gladius was getting rotated out as a main fighter for the UAE, and so a lot of Gladiuses were ending up in surplus, and a lot of people were purchasing them and finding that they really liked them. So a lot of other corporations were building light fighters. Drake built the Buccaneer, and Anvil built the Arrow. This is a unique ship because it swaps out the typical armor of a Anvil ship for maneuverability, but it does not skimp on firepower with 2 size 3 weapon hardpoints and 2 size 1 weapon hardpoints. But this was built in 2948 recently, so it's a fairly decent fighter for what it does, and it's fairly cheap for what it does as well. It's pretty popular. From that, let's go on over here and talk about the big behemoth in the room, the Carrick. Now, the Carrick is interesting. So the Carrick is another one of those we done messed up ships made by the UAE. The Carrick is built specifically because of a tragedy that occurred with a UAE capital ship. The UAE capital ship was sent out to do a science mission, to exploration, study an anomaly, but all hands would be lost. And there had been some debate up to that point if the military needed dedicated science vessels rather than using capital ships. And after the loss of the capital ship, they decided they were going to do so. But those in charge of the Navy were incredibly embarrassed by it, so they covered up the whole incident and gave a no-bid contract to Anvil to build them their science vessel, which became the Carrick. The Carrick was first introduced in high secrecy. It just shows up on the testing bases of the UAE, and a bunch of amateur observers see it and go, "What is this?" There are theories that it was a super doomsday weapon, like a major bomber was what this was supposed to be. But when it turned out it was an exploration ship, a lot of surveyors and explorers wanted their hands on the Carrick because A, it's Anvil, which is pretty known for being rugged, a rugged design, and B, it had the same kind of design language as many other Anvil ships out there. And there hadn't really been really good dedicated explorers. But because of the cover-ups, the UAE denied Anvil's request to make civilian Carricks. As a result, the Carrick remained in service in military service exclusively for 100 years before it finally was being allowed to sold to the public. That's only because the admirals who were involved in the cover-up got found and fired, which allowed the Carrick to actually reach civilian service. But the real big thing about the Carrick is it's an exploration ship. To give you kind of concept on its range, it is the only ship to have reached the Oort cloud of the Killian system. And the Killian system is 194 astronomical units across. Or big. So we're talking something that is about 4 times the length of the solar system. This is the only ship to have made it to the outer limits of that system and back. So without having to refuel. So this is a pretty beefy explorer. So if you're looking for an explorer ship, and you have a lot of money, because this is also very expensive, this is a great ship. Now, the other big thing is why the Carrick is so important. It won Best in Show this year, but also because there is a new variant right here. This is the C8. The C8 is a bespoke snubcraft that was built specifically for the Carrick. The C8, which is over there as well, that's just kind of the regular C8, has a bit of a cargo bay, it has some jump seats, and has a pilot. They've released a rescue variant of it here, which has a Tier 3 medical bed to act as kind of an ambulance. So that's got a lot of hubbub and buzz about the ship here today. From here, let's go on to the Hawk. So the Hawk is the result of Project Brawler. Now, Project Brawler had a unique concept. They wanted to make a ship that could be good at close-range dogfighting, ground support, and logistical support. Ground attack and logistical support. Which is an interesting combination, difficult to make. They went up against Aegis, but the thing that won the Hawk over the Aegis was that the Hawk was built with F7A Hornet parts. So there were already tons of equipment laying around and parts laying around to work with the Hawk that were unique, not unique to Hawk, but could be found in the logistics train already. And the thing about the Hawk is that it's good. It's good at what it does, and that's it. It's terrible at everything else. It is a ground attack, close-range dogfighter that can do some logistical support, and that's it. And as a result, every time the Hawk is deployed to deal with threats for ground attack or close-range dogfighting or any kind of logistical support, the opponents realize what it is and just do not stay on the ground or don't get in close with the ship. They stay far away. So it's so good at its job that it does not, it gives itself out of the job. It kind of works itself out of the job entirely. But it has been discovered by the bounty hunters of the Star Citizen universe and is fairly popular bounty hunter ship as well. Because on the back here has been converted into a prisoner bay. You can put one prisoner in and lock them up and they cannot get out. So it allows for a little bit of transport. It also has a small EMP generator on it, and it has I think 4 size 2 or size 3 weapon hard points and 2 size 1s. So it's got some pretty beefy guns on it as well. There is also some aftermarket upgrade kits for the Hawk. One's called the Dire Hawk, which is an upgunned kit, and one called the Shadow Hawk, which is a stealth variant. And at least the Dire Hawk has been discussed by Anvil to have gone into as a variant of the Hawk. But that is the U9 Hawk. Let's move on to the Hurricane, the OG Anvil ship. So, the Hurricane is the quintessential example of Anvil design. Every ship you've seen here has some element of this ship in it, and I'll show what you mean. First off, backswept wings. Almost all Anvil ships, even over here, the Carrick, has wings in some way, shape, or form. And at the very kind of center back, the kind of the center of mass, you always have a closed circlet. So this little circlet inside of a triangle, all of the Anvil ships have this design built into them in some way, shape, or form. Beyond being the blueprint for all Anvil ships, the Hurricane is famous because of Case Aerospace, as we talked about before. It was very good at defeating Tavaran targets, but it was reintroduced in 2871 because of the resurgent Vandul threat, and made a name for itself in the fall of Caliban by helping to clear out paths for civilian transports to escape. Since then, it has been used by militia and military alike. It's got 4 size 3 hard points on a turret up there, plus these are both size 4 guns. So you have a turret operator who can put out a lot of firepower. And it's a very fast ship. The best way to fly this ship is zoom and boom, but it definitely requires 2 people to get the most out of it. With that all done, let's head off to the other offerings of Anvil. So, the F8 Lightning is the evolution of the F7 Hornet. This ship is everything that Anvil has learned about fighting the Vandul, boiled down into a single expression of violence. It has... let me find my notes and I will tell you exactly how this works. It has 6 size 3, 2 size 4, with 2 size 3 missile mounts. This thing has more firepower than the Hurricane. And it's a single seater. Can all be used by the pilot. It has much more armor compared to a typical ship of its size, which means it can stay in a fight much longer. This thing is a beat stick. It is a flying, like, defense platform rather than a fighter. And that is why it is so effective and why the UE is kind of cycling out all of their older ships for the new F8s, but it takes a while for them to build. There is a civilian model that's coming out soon, but if you want to see it other than here on the floor, you'll see it whenever the Reckless 999 to do displays, usually at Invictus, you'll be able to see them fly their red-colored F8s. So, from one of the newest to another one of the older ones, the Valkyrie. Now, the Valkyrie's got an interesting story.
Can we sue them for not letting us rent that?
I don't think so. So the Valkyrie is an interesting story because originally the Valkyrie was designed with... It was designed before the UE needed it. In 2802, in the middle of the design of the Hornet, they were already looking at the next generation of ships that they wanted to build. They knew they wanted to get away from combat ships and do something more non-combat, so they went to a supercomputer on Terra and fed in a bunch of information about what other analysts had said about the future of UE military and asked the supercomputer what ship should they make. The supercomputer came back and said, you should make a heavy dropship because it's the one thing that the UE doesn't have. So they started developing the heavy dropship, and lo and behold, about 6 or 7 years later, the UE comes forward and says, hey, we need a design for a heavy dropship. So by the time the UE actually needed it, Anvil had already, not only had already concepted it, but had already made and prototyped it, so they could just show it to them, you mean this? Needless to say, they won the contract, and the Valkyrie has become the quote-unquote way to fly in the UE, Navy, and Army ever since. It's also gotten a lot of use out of prospector and exploration crews who like to use it because it can hold a lot of people. It can hold 40 people inside, plus a heavy vehicle. So you can move an entire survey crew fairly quickly from place to place with the Valkyrie without having to have specialized equipment or rigs or anything else like that. So, all right, with that, let's move on over to the final version. Oh, well, we'll talk about the Spartan real quick. This is the Atlas chassis. I'm not going to go into too depths about it because it's just not that important. The Atlas chassis was developed in 2822. And because Tumbrel was going out of business, which we'll talk about tomorrow, because Tumbrel was going out of, or Thursday, because Tumbrel was going out of business. They didn't really have the facilities to build ground vehicles, but the UAE needed ground vehicles for their new Army and Navy and Marines. So Anvil stepped forward and built a flexible modular chassis that they call the Atlas chassis. So this Atlas chassis is used for the Spartan, which is an armored personnel carrier, which you see have the upgraded guns on the top, plus, I believe, 8 seats. Yeah, 8 seats in the back. Driver. Then there's also 2 other versions, the Centurion and the Ballista, which we'll talk about here in a moment. But for now, let's go over and talk about the Hornets. Hornets, plural. 2806. The UAE is looking to replace its Aegis Avenger. Aegis Avenger is a good ship, but they don't want to have anything to do with the Aegis brand anymore, so they're trying to replace everything. They asked a bunch of people to submit plans. Anvil, which had already made the Terrapin, submits their Hornet design, the F7 Hornet design, and it is accepted. Little did they realize that the F7 would be the future of all spaceship design and manufacturing, period. Because while the F7 was under development, many local militias and bounty hunters and mercenaries got wind of this new ship and requested Anvil make a version for the civilian market because of how popular the Terrapin was. Anvil asked the UAE if they could do so, and they gave them their consent. So the F7A and the F7C, the F7A being the military variant, the F7C being the civilian variant, were both started development almost the exact same time. So they came out at the same time too. This is the Mark II. The Mark I is not here, but the Mark II is one that was updated in 2923. This was, or no, 2948 was when this was updated to the modern standards. May have been 2946, I think, actually 2946. So this ship is more modern, but the older versions are still around and still in service as well. And the F7C was developed and became super popular. The thing you have to understand about the Hornet is that it is the most deadly space fighter in the history of humanity. It has more sorties and more kills in any theater, and more theaters than any other ship, period. This thing is a dangerous, dangerous weapon. And because it's been sold not only to military but also civilian markets, almost all military markets now, or military manufacturers now also sell civilian versions of their ship simply because of how successful it was. The Hornet made Anvil who they are today. So with that, let's look at some of the variants as well as the civilian version. This over here is the stealth version. This is the Ghost, the F7S Ghost. This has a paint that's painted on it, which kind of absorbs sensors and other readings to help keep it more stealthy. And it has stealth components installed as well, with its central area here being kind of removed that you normally see with other ships. From there, let's go to the Super Hornet here in the middle. The Super Hornet is the F7CM. This is a 2-seater variant of the Hornet that has up everything. This is the closest you're going to see the F7A outside of the S7A. This is the closest thing you're going to get from the civilian market. And it's very well liked by that. It's actually exclusively flown by the not exclusively anymore, but it was flown a lot by the Bremen Defense Force, who are the basis for the modern civilian defense force. Over here is the actual F7C, which is the basic version. This is the model that it was based off of the F7A. So if you look at this design here, this is what the original F7A looked more like. This sort of design. And it doesn't have it has a central turret, but it's replaced here with a cargo pod. So you can get your cargo in here. A little bit of cargo. Then lastly of the variants, the main variants, we have the tracker. So the F7CT tracker is a variant of the Hornet, which is designed as a scanning ship. It has this long eye radar on the middle here in the back, which serves to extend its radar range significantly. So it can be used as like a CNC ship or coordination ship, or even just long range observation if need be. This last one here is not actually a variant, but more of a standalone. It's part of the Masters of Flight series. This is, in the mid-28th century, a woman by the name of Aria Riley, famous ace pilot of Squadron 42, famously said that the Hornet was the best ship she had ever flown. She said that this thing, she had put it through so many tests to try to get it to fail, but no matter what she did, to put tests in, simulations and real life, no matter what she did to the ship, it would always come out. She famously said that the Hornet is cursed to succeed in anything it does. But because of her extensive use of the Hornet and her evangelical nature with the Hornet, the Anvil Aerospace created the Wildfire variant. This is the Anvil Wildfire, the Hornet Wildfire, which actually is just an F7C, but with the custom loadout of Aria Riley. This is her all-purpose loadout, is what you would call it. From the Hornets, let's go talk about the future of Anvil and a little bit more about the Atlas chassis. This is the Ballista. This is another Atlas chassis. It's designed as an anti-air defense platform with missiles. The thing about the Ballista is that it's not just an anti-air defense. You can actually use this as a missile artillery if you like to, and it's fairly effective at its job. These missiles, as of right now, if you fire them at a target which is under, I believe, 2 kilometers, they cannot evade them. It is too fast. They come in too fast for them to evade, and it's almost impossible to see these things when they're on the ground if you're using sensors. They have very low profile, so they're very good at air defense, which is why not only do we have the Ballista, but we have the Centurion. So the Centurion here is similar to the Ballista, but it has a better, I think it has better ground targets here. I think this gun up here is a little bit better, but it also has these anti-air guns. Because it's almost impossible to see, these are size 4s, 4 size 4s. So it has a massive amount of firepower. You could park this outside of, I don't know, Jumptown or another location and lock it down for a very long time if you can put it in the right position without much air support at all. So that is the Atlas chassis. I expect to see more from the Atlas chassis as we go forward, but that's all we have for now. From there, let's look at the concept ships, the ships that are not quite on the floor yet, but will be in the future. All right, so this is the Crucible, the flying toolbox. This is a mobile garage. The center right there, that part right there, is known as the Scarab. Not only can it repair ships that are landed in it, but you can detach it and leave it behind to repair on its own. But these arms all have arms inside of them that work as mobile kind of stripping and refinishing, and they're repair arms. This ship is designed to fly alongside fleets and help them repair not only bigger fleets, but also smaller ships. It's a flying garage if you want to do any kind of major repairs. It can do everything from everything a dock can do, effectively, as long as they have the resources. Then we have the Valkyrie. This is part transport, or part landing craft, part carrier. It has 3 extra small, or extra small.
Liberator.
Did I say Valkyrie?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's because Anvil sucks at the naming schemes, because you have the Valkyrie Liberator as well. So Liberator. This is the Liberator, which is part dropship, part landing craft, part carrier. So it has 3 XL pads on it, plus a hangar which can hold up to, or a garage that can hold up to 2 tanks, or even snub ships. So it's a very effective tool for transport. I think they classify it as a light transport more than anything, but it also has guns and crew members, so it's designed to transport into combat zones. Then lastly, we have the newest offering from Anvil, the Legionnaire. So the Legionnaire is an interesting combination. It can hold 8 angry Marines and breach doors with either hacking. It has a dedicated hacker seat, but it also has an armory, including breaching charges that it can use. This thing is designed to quickly go into a ship that is not expecting it, dock suddenly, and disgorge its cargo and get out. It's used by the UAE Marines extensively, but it is still in concept for us civilians. So that's the Valkyrie.
What if the Marines aren't angry? How many can fit inside then?
Probably 20. If they're not angry. Angry Marines are pretty big. Alrighty. So that is the floor, the Anvil floor here at IAE 2952. Hopefully that helps you out a little bit, give you some context for some of these ships and a little bit of lore. If you want a more extensive look at some of this lore, you can check out the Astro Historian, where I do the similar thing, but I'm doing all of the deep lore of everything, so you can give a better idea, a little bit more professionally done, more edited and such. And yeah, if you enjoyed this, please do join us live on the floor tomorrow or any other day during the sale at 3 p.m. Eastern. If you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, hit those sorts of buttons. And of course, I want to hear your thoughts on these ships in the comments below. Thank you for these folks who are joining us here live on the floor. And like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black.